one of the most important things to know and understand about reading that is often not taught is what happens in the brain when a person is learning to read and reading later on as a skilled reader. So in the brain, there are areas that are specialized for making sense of the world through our senses. So there's areas of our brain that are designed for understanding what we smell, what we hear, what we touch, what we see. So the part that we use for seeing is in the back of our brain, way back lower down here. It's the visual part of your brain. And then we also have a part of our brain that isn't just used for a sense. It's specifically designed to help us learn speaking, how to speak, how to listen to speech, how to understand language. So the speech and language part of the brain is over here on the left side of your head. If you take your left hand and put it over there, that's the part. So I want you to just remember it's on that side. When people are learning to read, there's not just one part of the brain that every human being automatically uses for reading, like we do for speaking and for the use of our senses. So when people are learning to read, there's a couple different areas that people tend to naturally rely on a lot. And then instructional methods can also kind of sway people toward using one part of the brain or the other. On the back of that St. Thomas Aquinas picture, I think you've already seen, there's a brain there. People tend to either rely really heavily on the visual part of the brain in the back or on the speech part of the brain on their left. No matter what, we use a little bit of both of those and other parts of our brain. Everybody has kind of spread out in terms of reading, but which of those two you rely on really colors how good a reader you are. So skilled readers tend to rely heavily on the speech processing part of their brain. It makes getting the words off the page in the first place easier. It makes remembering it makes comprehension easier. It makes remembering what you've read easier. And that then indirectly affects spelling and writing and often even handwriting. On the other hand, if you rely heavily on the visual part of your brain for reading, it's clunkier to get the words off the page in the first place. It's hard to comprehend, sometimes pretty much impossible, but even if a person does comprehend, they kind of compensate enough to be able to comprehend. They're going to have a much harder time remembering what they've read. Even if they're able to do that, they'll have a very hard time writing. And then spelling is nearly impossible unless you've been heavily relying on the speech processing part of your brain. So it's for this reason that sometimes people think that just reading a lot makes a person a good speller. That's true if they heavily rely on the speech processing part of their brain. But if they heavily rely on the visual part of their brain back here, it doesn't matter how much they read, they're going to have a really hard time becoming a good speller. It's unlikely to happen. But the better they are at using that visual part of their brain, the better visual memory they have, then the more they'll be able to compensate and become a sort of decent speller or a sort of decent writer.